Here's just a slideshow of some of the things I've done through the years. I started with Painter, probably near its beginning, really, in version 1.3. It was the program that got me interested in computers in the first place, really. I had already been an established illustrator 10 years prior to that, in the early 80s, getting my start in agencies that focused on package design and consumer market testing and things like that. So there's a strong need for visuals that were mostly done with markers, pencils, airbrush, and ink work that used an old stat camera to make and turn into transfer art and things like that. So I freelanced there about 8 years through the 80s, and about 1990 the computer started to make some inroads into the kind of work that I was working at. Let me show you some of these things. Let's quit this slideshow deal. Go to this. So when I started at this agency in the 80s, this is the kind of thing they'd have me do. I'd work on creating these visuals with markers and pencils and using airbrush to create faux marble. And
the broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All these parts are pasted on with spray glue, and like even simple things like this airbrush background. You had to make it with an airbrush and cut it out on a piece of paper and apply it. It's very hands-on. So it let me explore all kinds of ways to show food and to sell a product. It was an interesting way to make a living, drawing peas and corn and broccoli and flowers and marble and you name it. So I got a lot of good education there in how to market illustration. As time went on, they let young Mike take over final illustration work, and one of the first opportunities I had was doing 60 illustrations for Gerber baby food in France, believe it or not. And they had all these very strange things that you'd never see on a Gerber label today. But these are all conventional airbrush illustrations, very small, I might add. They're about 3 inches wide this way, and they got printed even smaller here. This is minuscule on these labels. These labels are about 1 inch tall. So it was fairly forgiving a way to start into illustration. Eventually, doing mock-ups and things, I had opportunities to design some packages and then eventually get to illustrate them as well. This was a fun project for Jim Beam Whiskey, holiday carton, that I designed to work on different faces. So it almost was like a point-of-purchase display. And then if you lined up different faces of the house, it became a different house, and it kind of grew on the shelf. It was really fun. So anyway, by the time 1989 rolled along, this is one of the last airbrush pieces I did in the 80s. It's all very conventional, every little frisket cut out and everything. So Adobe Illustrator could do this, but it couldn't give me all the subtle nuance of texture and glow that I really liked, even on a simple thing like this. And this is for a magazine cover. The masthead went up here, and the list of articles talking about 1989. So that's that. Let's get into. So I went through the 90s learning how to use Painter and how it could make the transition from the kind of work I had done with conventional medium And this is one of the greatest opportunities I had during that time. It was probably 1997, 98. Got to redesign the Hidden Valley labeling system. And all these were done digitally in Painter. Even the pencil work, I was really gung-ho about doing everything digitally. You can kind of see some of the process that I had here in building these illustrations, starting with very rough scribbles, doing a more delineated version of it, doing a tonal version of it, getting some approvals along the way. And I kind of did a morphing of my painting and pencil work and how it kind of all flows together. There's me a long time ago, before I had gray hair. And I used beige CRTs. I'm still under here. This is an illustration that's on my website using Painter 11, or Painter 10 actually. Starting with a traditional pencil drawing, trying to imagine this place. Then doing a finer pencil drawing of it and bringing that into Painter and adding some tone digitally to kind of build it up. This is using more of the same, building the tone around the pencil drawing.
Mike, hopefully you don't,
yes.
Hopefully you don't hear the echoes much anymore. But
not as much, not at all.
Okay. I'm wondering, how exactly do you bring your pencil drawings in? Do you just scan them and open them up?
I'll show you right now. I just wanted to give you a little bit of history. Here we are in Painter 2015. Some inspiration. This is a pencil drawing that I did for another image that's on the site. This is the very first idea of it for me, trying to capture the nuance and glow of what the client. This is for Celestial Seasonings, a tea company, for an iced tea, and set in Savannah, Georgia. It was called a sweet tea. And I think of Georgia when I think of sweet tea, so that's how this came to be. Then here's the final of that image. And what I'll do is I will scan that pencil in and then start building it out by creating some of the pieces for it. I knew I was going to have this railing in there, so I drew this railing. Let's see what else I got here. I knew I had a wrought iron table that I could not find reference for, so I made one in Painter, creating all of the shapes and just rotating them around. You get the idea. Making up this thing was just a matter of just picking little elements that I liked and wanted to see, and it was kind of informed from the pencil I had done. Then I used some perspective tools to lay it down at the right perspective I wanted. I created a park in the background. the magnolias were another drawing based on, I always loved Martin Heed. Martin Heed is one of my favorites. So I put Martin Heed's painting on the screen in front of me and kind of drew it from the inspiration of this, obviously, but it's certainly not a perfect copy of it. And I didn't want it to be. I just wanted to capture some of the magic that he's got going on there. So all that to say, when I bring it all together, like say the flowers, let's isolate those. You can see that they're on their own layer. And what I like to do, getting to your point, Tanya, I take the pencil drawing and I create I go up and I select it by auto-selecting it by image luminance. You can't do that to that, but I select the image luminance of the pencil. So like say the Magnolia's pencil. I will select the whole thing with image luminance. And you can see all those selections, and I'll save it as a channel. And then you can see it in negative. Then I'll create a clip that'll select the whole pencil drawing by simply using the magic wand, clicking and dragging in the image, and you see it does a pretty great job. Then I'll go in and select, I'll clean it up by sub-selecting and adding to the selection, things like this. Or I'll do it at a channel level as well. So I do all that to get that. Then I'll select the whole pencil and go to my composition and paste it in. And I want to keep that pencil around while I paint, so I create another mask of it. I create this pencil mask of it, so while I'm painting, I can paint on either side of it, of the mask or the selection. So that way, you can see, I'll show you, I can load the flower pencil here using an airbrush. Just going to align it in some brown sepia tone and selecting the flowers up here. You can see it correlates directly with the painting. And conversely, I can take this selection and invert it, that's Command-I, and hide the marching ants there, and work on the other side of the fence of it. So you can see by inverting the mask. So that way it keeps my pencil drawing around a lot longer while I'm painting. And keeps it, you can still see some artifacts of the pencil still here, just because I like it. And it works well with the kinds of brushes I choose to use. This is a brush I made from the, I think it's a liquid sponge brush. And you can see how it samples the color and pulls it away depending on the opacity that I choose to pick. I use the color variability a lot in adding even more texture to it. I want to add a green cast to this, more of a green cast. See how it pulls away at the drawing. You can see like how interactive that is. It's just like working with wet paint. So obviously it's a pretty labor-intensive thing. You can see my wrought iron table here. Hide all of these parts. Right now I'm in this, what is it, the symmetry mirror mode. I don't want to be in mirror mode. Sometimes it toggles on, I don't know why. But you can see how I can isolate all of these elements. And you can see the pencil back here. I turned it into a multiply for the landscape. So you can see, there it is. Well, I just turn that into a multiply, because I still want it hanging around, and I just underpaint it with paint tools. So if I select the canvas here, select this bristle brush, you can see how I can underpaint the pencil drawing.
Mike, I have a question from Yogita.
Yeah.
And she's wondering how you create texture on the wrought iron table.
That was a good question. Obviously, in its natural state, it's pretty hard-edged and not what a wrought iron table is. You can see on some of the edges here, I used the glass distortion tool to add some wiggle to that hard edge. That's simply by going to my table perspective here and selecting the surface. Let me show you how it happens. First, you pick a good paper texture that you want down here in the library at the scale that you want. Make sure you turn off preserve transparency. Select the layer, go to Effects, use the glass distortion, and you should be able to start seeing some of it going on right now. Let's get real obvious. Obviously, it's going over the top, but you get the idea. You can really rough it up. Get more coarse with it, less soft, to get the desired effect. So you start there. Then when I get to my final composition, get too many of these things open. Okay. Here it is there. So I want to take it even further. So here's my table layers. There's the shadow underneath the flowers and the surface texture. So let's take part of this here. I really love the sponge brush. It's been a constant source of inspiration for me to work with because it's just so interactive. But if you make the brush really big, you can see how it starts to beat up that surface even more. If I wanted to protect that surface a little bit, or the edge, I could preserve the transparency. When I do this, well, it still does that. Not with this brush, but with other kinds of brushes, it can protect it. So you can see how I gotta pick the right color here and give some more opacity to it. To get this tone to obey, sometimes what I'll do is I'll create a new layer and turn it into a multiply and select the surface outline or channel, if you will. Go back to that multiply layer, and that'll in turn let me add texture to it with the variable spatter. And we'll do things like that. And it builds, the multiply lets it build up as you go over it without it just, it just builds the color. So it's just one way to add more texture to it.
That looks great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Another real valuable tool I use in doing glass and creating reflective surfaces. These are all the layers for the glass. So if you start deleting some of these, you can see how stacked they are. Getting down to the base of it. And I've created a subcategory of all the brushes that I like to use. And it kind of affords me the ability to press control and click, and it opens them up really quickly for me to access. So like, what if I wanted to work on this highlight, expand it or pull it around? The Distorto brushes let you pull things around in a really liquid way that lets you get these great liquid effects. If you should change the point of it, you can get even more subtle with it. And you get the idea.
I love
Working
that.
on highlights.
That's so cool. I've never
It's a
thought
real
about
easy way to.
Go ahead.
Believe me, Painter is full of brushes that you just don't think, oh, what am I going to use that for? Sponge brush. What am I going to use that for? Well, if you start working the levers a little bit, it gives you an idea of how to use these ways, use them in ways that people have not thought of. I'm sure people have thought of using the liquid brush to do that. I mean, there's liquefied brushes, I think, in Photoshop that people use all the time. So I don't know, this.
You have a comment in the Q&A panel from Yugita saying, that's the most amazing thing created with Corel Painter that I've ever seen. Thanks for explaining.
Oh my. This was a fun thing. Being a commercial illustrator, you get asked to do all kinds of things. I like the ability of taking fine art approaches to, crass commercial, I need to have this because I'm old kind of products. I mean, this is very unromantic. This is the anti-action figure animator illustrator thing to do, but it really pays the bills and lets me work with texture in a way that's above and beyond what Photoshop really gives you. And it starts with a pencil drawing like this. Where you can see the basic pencil, and I've scanned them in, isolated them. Let's go back to the multiply so you can see the tone going on underneath. So, like say on the blankets or pillows and sheets rather, if I turn the pencil off, you can see the underpainting. And I use relatively few brushes to do what I do, just because you find something that works for you, and it just doesn't make sense to, I think it helps create a continuity to your work, to have something as a known quantity. Because it's bewildering. Painter has hundreds and hundreds of variations on things that will drive you crazy if you don't learn how to focus and keep close tabs on your stylistic objectives. So you can see how this is just real painless in that it just pulls those pixels around. If I want to add to them more, I just increase the opacity of the brush. Right now I'm just using the keyboard shortcut for that. So if I want to get real white. So on and on it goes until you get what you want. But I'm keeping the pencil around a lot. And if I wanted to soften some of the pencil texture in the pencil layer, like this is a little bit coarse, I could just select that, pick white, and obviously I'm just working in grayscale right now, and I'm actually kind of nullifying that texture, but I'm also smoothing it and giving it some blending that's a little softer. So, you know, I'll get this to a point where the client will like it. Put in some highlights to give it more sparkle. So I'll get approval from the client for that and go on to the final, where I can utilize color, both cool and warm whites, to make this more dimensional and interesting. And there's lots of layers in here, because with a commercial illustration you've got a lot of people to please, a lot of people, and there's a lot of money resting on the success of its communication. So you'll get lots of comments about adjusting the texture here on the product, making this pink rather than blue. So you have to build in all of these variables, and you have to work on layers. But I don't want to lose artistic expression just because I have to have all these things on layers. You can see I create channels of all these pencils, so I have some points of regress to go back to some of the original sources. And they just kind of hang around in the background, or I can use them to select color. Like say if I wanted to select just that sheet, I created a channel. If they said, well, we want it to be whiter, or I could select it and isolate it. Or if I want to protect this edge from all this texture going on in here while I'm painting, it's just an added tool to help protect it.
How long does it typically take you to get through the review process with the client, or are they all different?
Oh, it's all different. Sometimes it's a matter of hours. Sometimes they get back to you in a week or two. Sometimes they get back to you 4 months later. And so you got to be ready to make the change.
Wow, so they don't really have a start and end date to the project then, if they can
Oh, of course they do.
They do?
I mean, it depends. So for ongoing projects, like I said, it's very different. Let's see, what can I show you next? What would you be interested in?
I can tell that you're using a Wacom tablet. Which one are you using?
I'm using the large Wacom tablet. You can see my workstation here. Let's see. Okay, I use Painter 11. Let's see. Now let's do this. So I use the tablet here. This is some nonsense I put together for showing my workspace. But get a nice comfortable chair. I like to keep my keyboard really close at hand for keyboard shortcuts. I built this thing to angle my tablet in a way that is comfortable to use for the long term. I'm using a secondary monitor, mostly for content and entertainment purposes only. But actually, that's the computer, and I just put it on the big display. Anyway, and plus it should be noted, working digitally, you need to work in a pretty dimly lit place. I mean, people are going to walk into your office and say, wow, it's kind of dark in here. How are you working? Well, it's beneficial, really, and gives you a much more honest idea of what color and tone represent on your screen.
I have a question from Tom, and he's wondering if there's anything special about your scanner.
Oh, it's a cheap $89 scanner. It's a document scanner, really. And I don't really need a fancy one because I'm scanning in pencil drawings, and it's all grayscale, basically. So it doesn't have to be real fancy. I'd like to get a nicer one, but they cost too much money. and I don't scan color hardly ever, so color is all done digitally. Has been for a real long time. Fun, something I did last year for Celestial Seasons. I think people have seen this image before, but
I think it's my favorite image.
you can see
I love it.
The land. Yeah. Oh, it was a lot of fun to do. Getting into working with texture and tone. It's a fairly large image. It's about 27 inches wide. But it only goes on a tee box. It's about 5 inches wide, 6 inches wide. But most digital art tends to be too sharp all the time, and it kind of forces you to be really sharp. And so as a digital artist, you're kind of always fighting to preserve the integrity of the edge of an image, or the lack thereof. And if you can get subtle and grainy with texture, it creates an atmospheric perspective that comes real natural to natural media, but not to digital pixels and edges and selections. They tend to be really hard or too soft. And one of the beauties of Painter is that it lets you, the brushes let you create an interesting edge. It's not too soft. It's not, everything's not just an airbrush, but a bristled brush that you can control. So how I got here was doing another pencil drawing.
So speaking
But
of
the
your,
pencil drawing didn't start here.
we did have a question about.
This is.
I'm sorry. There's a little delay every time I try to speak, so I'm
Yeah.
not trying to speak over you. But Tom,
No, not at all.
Tom is wondering what type of paper you typically use for your pencil drawings.
I love just a Strathmore medium grain paper. The paper I have right in front of you is a real cheap newsprint, and if I just want to scribble and try to mind glide about what I want to do with an image, this is kind of what I'll do. And I'll scan this and put it into the template of the layout. But it really starts here, just really kind of trying to picture this place that doesn't exist. And then I'll actually put that up on my screen, on my monitor, believe it or not, and turn my my monitor into the most expensive light box ever, and lay my paper on the edge of the monitor, and I'll trace out the composition, and then quickly pull it off and start working on the textures and building that up. So then I'll show the client something like this with the layout and template, and shows where all the hills break, and so there's no crazy tangents going on, and all the things that have to be there, not covering up important parts, kind of working on it. Now all these flowers, you can see I didn't really draw all of them because it was way too many, and I knew what I wanted to do. So I did a separate drawing of the flower parts, and these were just random imaginations of jasmine flowers. I put some reference to jasmine flowers on there and kind of went crazy. Then I isolated all of those drawings by creating a real tight clip by tracing it with the wand and then cleaning it up further. Then I could select all those guys and put them into two groups. So you can see jasmine plants are in a group there. Buds up here are in a separate one. Flower heads are in a separate one. So then in turn I would turn that into a nozzle by going to the nozzle library, make a nozzle from group. I would click on that and it would make this nozzle. Then I would just spray, if you will, all of these flowers. Let's hide some of this stuff. Here's the highlights I put in the background. But let's get the flower hill. So we can start breaking it down. You can see where all the image hose flowers have been sprayed. Some of the stems, just to build up this hillside. So I got in here and just pushed paint around on this hill base using another texture distortion brush, picking a light texture. That's the one I want. I want this one. I'll do it in color so you can actually see what's going on. Protect the edges. So you can see how this starts to add this underlying texture. You can turn that off. This button needs to be bigger because I turn it on and off all the time. So you can see how now it'll work outside of that. So I'm refining the edge of this clip by pushing and pulling paint, creating this background of area. And it's using the texture here to kind of selectively add noise and randomness to that hill edge. Then I started spraying these plants. Let's see, you can see these. So you can see it's pretty simple. I took the stems and just wanted to lay those in. And then I'll use tone. I'll use an airbrush and just spray over top of them to kick them back into the landscape and kind of weave them, if you will, into this. So it looks kind of busy right now. And it's one of the concerns that the client had. It looked a little bit too much. So getting into the final, rather than spraying colored nozzles or illustrations to do this, I stayed with the pencil drawings and just airbrushed and painted over top of them to make them less or more important, and then used airbrush tone over top of it to kind of calm it down, the whites of the flowers. So if you're careful with this, it looks a little less cut and paste, and it looks a little more random. And my goal here was to give these white flowers a nice sparkle in the layout, rather than too much concentration on the contrast of the leaves, creating visual noise. And I don't know. It was just a good way to do it quickly. But over in the regular part of the landscape, it's pretty hard to create the uniformity but yet randomness of natural media without painting every last bit of it. And I like to do it anyway. I got into this business because I like to do this stuff, not finding quicker ways to do it. The computer is already unbelievably quick comparatively to what natural media represents. And an utterly forgiving environment where if you don't like this, like say I wanted to think about how I could show the sunlight, well, or brighten it up a little bit. I mean, this is just toggling it on and off. How painless is that? You know, I didn't have to commit to painting over top of my painting and go, oh no, I don't like it. I can just turn it off. Anyway, that's that one.
This has been fantastic.
Any questions about this one?
I'm sure everybody would love to listen to you all day, but I don't expect you to continue to keep going through your work unless there's anything else that you absolutely wanted to show us. We're at the top of the hour, and I do want to apologize once again to everybody. It was entirely my fault that this web session started late. So I apologize, but we have recorded the entire session, and there's so much good information in here, Mike, that I
Yeah.
can probably even create some mini tip videos by just pulling out segments.
Well, yeah, I've got a lot of things I could talk about. Over 20 years, I've created hundreds of illustrations, and Painter has been at the heart of every single one of them. I couldn't do what I do with it without it. It's been a great empowerment tool for an artist who wanted just to draw pretty pictures, get into the digital world, and please all the clients that like all the undos and versions that the digital world give you. So, but I didn't want to lose my artistic objectives either. So, Painter has allowed me to do that, to not lose those subtleties. So, anyway.
Well, absolutely amazing. I do have one last question from Morgan, and she was just wondering, you kept mentioning references for your work, but how do you come up with the ideas and references for your various projects?
Well, a lot of times it comes, the client has an idea or they have a history about things that need to be addressed and echoed into what I'm producing for them. I don't work in a vacuum, that's for sure. I work with designers and art directors who have artistic visions but don't have the time or wherewithal to do it. So that's where a specialist like me comes in and roughs out ideas and finesses them and brings them to a final look. This is a fun piece that I use the perspective tools on. I've not had anything like this before, but you can see them here to help draw this city. I've got lots of process you can see on my website of how this came to be, but drawing a city like this would be really a lot of work. It would be too much to do. And being able to do all the windows separately, turn off all the lights, and use the perspective guides to get there was a lot of fun. Plus using, another reason why I wanted to bring this up, using the gravity brush, I was able to create this scribble texture that really was at the core of how I rendered this image. And this is really just what it was. It was scribbling around, and it took like 2-3 minutes because of how powerful this brush is in making it just multiplies as you scribble around. It starts like accelerating and creating this really complex texture that I roughened up a little bit, as you can see. And I used it to apply texture through image, through the effects menu here, surface control, things like that. And it added a real analog look to this that's kind of uncharacteristic of what I've done historically. But I just wanted to share this one thing that was a lot of fun to use this last summer with the launch of 2015.
And that's one of the new particle brushes, right?
Right, that's the gravity brush.
Yeah.
So
Tom is saying that that's such a great effect. He'd love to see a tutorial on that. I don't know if you're up for doing tutorials. We can talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to.
Okay. Well, we should make a plan.
But anyway, yeah. I find that it's like scribbling like this. I just make the brush really big. And it seems real faint there, but if I put that on a layer instead, I can scribble around like this. Let's change the weight of it. And multiply that, just duplicate it. and collapse it. And then give it even more weight. You can see how quickly that could be turned into that texture. And if I wanted to give it a more of that rough look, use my friend, the glass distortion tool. And you can see where all these little artifacts come in.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's neat.
So it gives it much more random things going on there. But I love these new brushes because they have a kind of a fresh new take on some of these brushes that utilize this. I've noticed this before with these. Oh, what is it? Bristle brushes. You know, they have all this going on, right? And if you open those up, you can add texture that way and smooth it down with the stroke jitter. It becomes real linear like this. And you could do this, scribble like this, but it doesn't have this spring in its step like these do, this dynamic that goes on that creates these little nuggets of intersection that that create energy. And I don't know, that's what intrigued me about them. It's this scribble. But you know, something as simple as that can really add dimension. Now when you load that as applying texture to an image, it more than just paper, how paper texture lets you do that, which gets a little tiled and a little dated, it really gives it a custom painted look.